These words are found in Hebrews, the 13th chapter. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I shall not fear what man shall do unto me. The missionary brought his message to a close that night in the little stone church on the mission station. He opened the altar for any who wanted to come down and pray. A tall, proud, young Swazi warrior stood to his feet in the deep shadows at the back of the church. The flickering lamplight playing on his face, he turned to the missionary and he said, Missionary, I accept this Jesus that you speak of. And the missionary beckoned to him, come on down here and let's talk to Jesus. And the young man stepped forward, laid his big 6-foot war shield down, bowed his shaggy head, his white ostrich plumes, laid his spears beside his shield and his club. And Jesus came that night and reached across that log and lifted the chains of darkness that had bound him. And the young man came to his feet, the tears running down his cheeks. He tried to wipe them away, but they just seemed to come faster than he could get rid of them. And finally, when it came his turn to testify, he thought he owed the crowd an apology. I must tell you, he said, there's no pain. It doesn't hurt anywhere. You can't hurt a Swazi warrior enough to make him cry. And yet these tears were running down his cheeks. It's just this thing that the missionary has told us about. This God has come in and he fills me with peace and joy. And there's no law in our tribe that forbids a man to cry for joy, is there? Then the tears flowed freely down his cheeks as he testified to what Jesus had done in his heart. He left the service 6 miles back down the mountain in the darkness of night. Early the next morning, he was up, and by dawn break, he stood outside of his father's hut. His father was the chief of the entire area. And when at last the old chief got up, this young man was right there. Father, I would speak to the people today. As the eldest son of the chief, heir to the chieftainship, he had the right to speak to the people. But the people had already scattered for the day. Some had gone to draw water. Others had gone to get firewood. Some had gone to herd the cattle. The father got some of the herd boys together, and he sent them running to go gather the village back together again. It was almost noon before the entire village was rounded up. The father turned to his eldest son. What is it that you would say to the people? And this proud young warrior stood before them. Father, I have disobeyed you. I've broken the law of the tribe that you laid down. I've been up there on the mountainside to the mission station where we were forbidden to go. But Father, this God that missionary tells us about as he preaches in our villages, he is real. He is alive. I know, for last night I too spoke with his God. He started to tell them what had happened. Fear crossed the face of the old chief. He listened a little bit, and then he turned to a young warrior that was seated right behind him, a half-brother to the man that was testifying. Listen, he whispered, I don't know what's happened, but go get the witch doctor and bring him back with you. Up over the mountainside dashed this boy to go find the witch doctor. In a little while, he was back with the witch doctor. I don't know who had ever told this young warrior anything about the doctrines of Christianity, about things like making restitution. But he knew that if he was ever going to get down on his knees and face God in prayer, there were some things in his life he was going to have to straighten out. Father, you remember that calf that disappeared 2 years ago that we said a crocodile had taken? Yes, I remember it. Father, you remember those goats that we said the hyenas had taken? Yes, I know about them. The chickens that we said a python had taken? Yes, I know. Well, Father, I'm the one that did it. There were others involved, but I'm the one who instigated it. Last night, God forgave me those things. Now I seek your forgiveness. I would repay you for all that I've done. The old witch doctor watched in amazement. He'd never seen anything like this before. Truly, this young son of yours has fallen under the terrible spell of that missionary. The entire village must be redoctored again. They said about the great ceremony of redoctoring the entire village. One of the boys ran and got a black goat without a blemish or a mark on it. Its throat was cut. The blood was caught in a little wooden dish. It was passed around to each member of the tribe. Each one had to, of the village, each one had to dip their finger into it and touch it to their tongue as a sign of allegiance to the spirits to which it had been offered. The meat was cut up, put into a pot, herbs and concoctions poured into the meat and onto the fire. They took up the pigs on top of the huts. They redoctored them against lightning. They took up the pigs at the corners of the gardens. They redoctored them against famine. They took ashes from the fire. They sprinkled them on all the footpaths leading into the chief's village. Any witch coming that way would encounter this invisible barrier. At last, the meat was cooked. Now came the greatest part of the ceremony. Every member of the village had to eat a tiny sliver of that meat so that the spirits to which it had been offered could gain entrance to them and could permeate and protect them from the inside. Around to each member of the village they went. They reached this proud young warrior. He leapt back. No, I can't do that. I no longer worship these spirits. I no longer fear these witches. I can't do these things. Father, it seems that somehow I've managed to disgrace my tribe. Better that you send me away. The old chief turned on his eldest son. All right, he shouted. Get out. Leave. You're vanquished from the Swazi nation. You're no longer my eldest son. The young man turned and started to leave. The witch doctor leapt forward. No, he can't go. Wherever he goes, the witches will gain entrance through him. He must eat this meat. The father beckoned to 4 young warriors standing behind him. They were half-brothers to the young man in front. They leapt forward, pinned his arms behind his back, tried to force him to eat the meat. He clenched his teeth and he wouldn't do it. They flung him to the ground. They tried to force him to eat the meat. Still clenched his teeth until finally one of the boys ran and got a round river rock and 4 pigs, and they pounded them into the ground, and they strapped their elder brother down with rawhide thongs. The old chief turned on one of the boys. Get the sjambak, he shouted. It's a criminal offense in Africa to use a sjambak on a man. A raw hippopotamus hide bullwhip tapering to a point 12 or 14 feet long. The sjambak was brought. The father stepped forward, and he brought that great lash whistling down across his eldest son. Blow upon blow upon blow, and each time the whip fell and rose again. It ripped through the flesh, leaving a wound open to the bone, until at last the whip simply thudded down dully on his unconscious form. The chief stepped back. Water was brought. As consciousness came back to him, the witch doctor was there. Just one bite, just one bite. Not a tear dimmed his eye now. I won't do it. Turn him over, the chief shouted. They rolled him over in the gravel. They strapped him down again. And then as the chief stepped forward, the second eldest brother, a young warrior in his early 20s, reached out and took the whip from him. "You're old now. You're tired. Let me have a chance." And with all the strength of his youth and the jealousy of his position in the tribe, he brought that great whip down across his elder brother, his chest, his face, his limbs, until once more it simply thudded down dully on his unconscious form. The chief turned to the witch doctor. "It's dark. Night has come. Stay here tonight. Protect us. Leave him there on the ground. He'll have changed his mind about this God of his by tomorrow. We'll see what he says tomorrow." The witch doctor turned to the people. "Get to your huts," he shouted. "No fires, no light to guide a witch into our midst. I'll stay with you and protect you tonight." The people scattered into their huts, barricaded the doors so that nothing could get in. 9, 10 o'clock that night, a moon started to shine over the edge of the mountains. In one of the little dark doorways to a grass beehive-shaped hut, the door pulled open an inch or two, and a tiny face peered out into the night. It was the little 9-year-old sister to the warrior who lay on the ground. She studied every shadow in the hut, in the yard, until she was sure nothing moved, slid open the door, leapt to her feet, flitted through the shadows and moonlight to where her brother lay, dropped to her knees, a slash of a sharp knife, and she severed the thongs that bound him. She reached over and grabbed a broken piece of pot with water in it, splashed it into his face. He sat up. Through thick, swollen eyes, he made out who it was, and he whispered, "Tell them, if they need me, I'll be at the mission station." No, I can't say anything. If I say anything at all, they'll know I had something to do with it, and I'll get the beating you were to get tomorrow. She turned and flitted back across the yard, dropped onto her hands and knees, scooted through the little low doorway to her grass hut, rolled herself up on the goat skins beside the dying embers of the fire. The young man slowly came to his feet, staggered over against the wall of the corral, poles, reached in among the poles and pulled out a walking stick. Leaning heavily on it, he disappeared into the 12-foot elephant grass surrounding the village. Dawn broke across Africa. Into the yard of the mission station, 6 miles away up the mountain, staggered this young warrior. At first, the missionary didn't recognize him. Then when he realized who it was, he started to scold him. "Don't you know? You're a Christian now. We don't go to these beer drinks. The people have beaten you to within an inch of your life. It's a miracle that you're alive. We don't do these things once we become Christians." Drawing every ounce of effort that he could, he reached up and stopped the missionary. In a voice that could be barely heard, he said, "Missionary, it didn't happen that way." They set him down in the shade of a thorn tree in the yard. The missionary sent somebody running to get a big white basin with disinfectant and water. And all through the morning, he washed away at the wounds and tried to get the gravel out. And the young man sat in stoical silence, never a sound or a tear, until at last they had patched him up as best as they could. The missionary went to stand up, and the young warrior reached out and stopped him. "Missionary," he whispered, "many times last night, as I climbed the mountainside, I would have to sit down in the darkness and get my strength. Missionary, As I sat there alone in the darkness, I looked down deep inside of me here. He was still there, missionary. He was still there. They didn't drive him out when they beat me. He didn't desert me. He was still there. Tell me, missionary, can they ever drive him out? No. You're the only one that can drive him out. As long as you walk by his side and you keep your hand firmly in his, he'll walk with you every step of the way through life, right to the gates of eternity. Oh, missionary, such love my people have never heard of. I must go back. I must take this message to them. They carried him over to the mission home. It wasn't much of a home. I remember it well, growing up in Africa. It was made of rusted sheets of corrugated iron. They stood upright. It was 22 feet long and 16 feet wide, and it had 2 wires inside that crossed in the middle, and 4 burlap curtains, and you pulled the curtains to make 4 rooms. It had 1 door and 2 windows. And just inside the door, on the floor, there were 3 large stones, and the fire was made there between those stones, and that was the kitchen in that mission home. Just inside the kitchen, they laid down some animal skins and blankets, and they stretched him out there, and the missionary's wife started to nurse him back to health. For about 3 days, they didn't know if he was going to make it. And then one morning when they got up and they pulled aside the burlap curtain and marched into the kitchen area, they knew they had won. He was seated beside the fire, and he had already kindled it from the coals left over from the night before. The next day when they got up, he had crawled out of the open door and was propped up in the sunlight just outside the kitchen door. And then, day by day, he gathered his strength. By the end of a month, he was all over the mission station, into everything. At the end of 2 months, there wasn't anything he didn't know something about. And then one morning, he walked into the kitchen, and he had in his hand a little black book. Missionary, I want you to teach me to look into this little book and talk to me the way it talks to you. Missionary tried to explain to him, we're too busy. We don't have the time to teach you how to read. Missionary, there are many of us young people that have now fled to the mission station. Give us work to do. We'll help you. And then you will have the time. They had an immediate council of war. Everybody was called in. Chores were assigned to everybody. It fell a lot of this young warrior to wash the dishes and to gather firewood. Each morning, just a few tin plates and knives and forks, but you'd never see dishes get washed so good in all your life. He was there by the hour. He became the proud owner of his own little black book. Back to the kitchen he came. He'd prop it up in front of him, and then he'd start in on the dishes, and pretty soon it would slow up, and then he'd get to sounding away, letter by letter. He'd say, why, there was a verse. That was a verse. He'd say it over to himself. Then he'd say it over again. Then he'd get blessed doing dishes. He'd call the missionaries' kids in from the yard, line them up in the kitchen. They were only about 6 or 7 years old, barefooted, short little pair of pants, no shirt, clay oxen that they had molded in their hands. He'd line them up in the kitchen. He'd say that verse to them. He'd make them stand there and repeat it after him. Then he'd say it over again. Then they'd have to repeat it after. My dad told me that most of the scripture that he knew from memory, he learned when he was 6 years old, standing there in the kitchen and repeating them over and over and over again so that he could escape and get outside and go to play with his oxen again. Well, I don't know. how much that warrior ever learned to read. But I was there when they called him up to the platform at the tabernacle at the camp meeting. Thousands of people seated on grass, the whole floor just covered in hay. He was blind by then. He was an old man. And they brought him up to the platform and stood him in front of the people. And he quoted a text out of the Old Testament somewhere. And our fingers flew as we searched for it. And he started to pace up and down, back and forth across the platform. He never hesitated. Verse after verse after verse after verse, down through the chapters of that book he went, fast as your eyes could follow him, never pausing, never hesitating, down through the next book, an hour and a half. Got to put it down inside here, missionary, so that if I'm ever separated from the book, I can still tell my people about this love that he has for us. He served his 2 years of probation. The day came for him to be baptized and taken into the church as a full member of the church. And as he went down to be baptized, he had another request. Missionary, I don't want to be baptized under my heathen name. My heathen name has awful memories for me. I want a new name. They said, what do you want to be called? Missionary, I read back here where God spoke to a young man many times. I want him to speak many times to me, and he must call me by a familiar name when he does. Call me Samuel from today on. They took him down and they baptized him by the Christian name of Samuel. I don't know one living missionary in my lifetime that could still accurately quote for you his heathen name. It was gone. His name was Samuel. Samuel met and married a fine Christian girl there on the mission station. By this time in the history of the work of the church in Africa, God had commissioned the missionary to start opening up the fever belt that lay between the Ubombo Mountains of Swaziland and the Indian Ocean 50 miles away. He was gone weeks at a time down there into the bushveld. He'd get permission from a chief, come back up to the mission in the mountains, take a young couple, and they'd go start a church. Then he'd ride his horse 50 miles in another direction, get permission from another chief, come and take another young couple. Then he'd go off in a different direction. Samuel waited impatiently for the day to come when he and his wife would be called to go. Knowing Samuel's impatience, one Saturday afternoon, the missionary had been gone for a month. He came galloping back into the mission station. Before he ever got off the horse, as he came into the yard up there, 100 yards from the house, he started to shout, Samuel! Samuel! Samuel was out of the kitchen like a shot, his little apron wadded up in his hand. He came sliding up to the horse, grabbed the bridle, stopped it. Is it me, missionary? Did you call me? Yes, Samuel. I've got a place for you to preach. It's way down across the bushveld. It's 40 miles away or more. It's on the other side of the Kamadi River. It's on the slopes of the Ubombo Mountains over there. It's in old Chief Msuduga's country. Msuduga. Samuel's eyes grew wide with alarm. Missionary, don't you know who Chief Msuduga is? He's famous through our entire world, missionary. He's an uncle to the king of Swaziland. He's famous for one reason. Every day he flies into a rage, and anybody within range of his spears dies, missionary. They die. I know, Samuel. I know who Chief Msuduga is. I've been camping in his village for more than a month now. I've seen dozens of men die by the spear. But last night, when the sun reached the edge of the earth, and we could just see the horns of the cattle against the sky, Chief Msuduga called me, and he gave me permission to start a church in his country. Samuel, what must we do about that? Missionary, if Chief Msuduga gave you permission, God must have made him do it. We'll be ready in the morning. Monday, at the crack of dawn, they left the mission station. Everything they owned on a single pack donkey. An old army blanket, gray with red faded stripes on it. A three-legged black cast iron cooking pot for cooking the cornmeal. A hand-carved wooden spoon, an axe, a small tin trunk with everything they owned in it. Down the winding trails into the bushveld, across the Kamati River, up the slopes of the mountains over there. They cut back the long grass. They drove poles into the ground. They wove reeds. They plastered mud. They left a little square over here in this wall to serve as a window, and another one over here on the other side. Then they left a little square doorway at the back. There was no door to close it with or to hang there. They put a thatched roof over it. And then they knelt out there in that blistered, baked yard under the tropical sun, just the three of them. And they had a dedication service. Samuel, his wife, and the missionary. There it is, Samuel. There's your church. There's all of Africa before you. The name of Jesus has never been spoken on these mountains. See what you can do about it. And Samuel set about the tremendous task of carrying the name of Jesus to the people of Africa. From village to village, preaching and praying with the people. From mountainside to mountainside, down by the river, where the women balanced their huge clay pots on their heads, filled with water. Up high up on the mountains, where the men herded the cattle and the goats, preaching and praying with the people. And one by one, individually, each one wrestled out of darkness. He started to bring them in. 2, 3, 4. The little church started to grow a congregation. 7, 8. And then one Sunday night, the close of the service, Samuel brought his message to a close, and he opened the altar for anybody who wanted to come down and pray. Among those who stood to their feet and came down, one of Chief Msuduga's wives was among them. Samuel and his wife knelt with her. They helped her pray. Back to the old chief up there she went. I'm a Christian now, Chief, and I won't do the things I used to do. I won't grind your snuff for you anymore. I won't cook your beer for you anymore. I won't participate in these wild heathen dances anymore. I'm a Christian, and my life's going to reflect it. That night, Chief Msuduga stormed into the outstation. Samuel grabbed his wife and brand new baby. They took refuge in the open door of the church. The chief was screaming at the top of his lungs, Samuel, I don't care what you do in this country, but you leave my village out of it. Do you understand? Yes, Chief. Yes, but Chief, this is God's house. Only God can turn people out of his house. I can't do it. If you feel that way about your village, Chief, keep them up there. Don't let them come down here at all. All right, the chief shouted. I'll do that. That's just one. There's still 27 other wives. I'll just forget about that one. Back to his wives he went. 6 months went by. Samuel's congregation continued to grow. The heavy rains came. There were now 15, and then 16, and 17, and 20. And then one Sunday night, among those who rose and came down to pray, a second of Chief Msuduga's wives was among them. Samuel and his wife helped her pray. Back to the old chief up there she went. I'm a Christian now, chief, and I'm not going to do the things I used to do. I'm not going to grind your snuff for you anymore. I'm certainly not going to cook your beer for you anymore. And I'm not going to participate in these wild heathen dances anymore. That night, Chief Msuduga and 6 of his councilmen stormed into the outstation, froth flicking from the corners of his mouth, and the councilmen stayed well out of spear range. Samuel and his wife took refuge inside the open door of the church. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, I told you to leave my village out of it. Yes, chief. Yes, chief. But you, chief, promised to keep your people up there. Now it seems that you can't control your wives, and you want to blame me for it. All right, the chief shouted. Forget about her. There's still 26 other wives. We'll just forget about those 2, but don't let it happen again. Back to his village up there he stormed. Samuel carried on with his work. The church started to grow now, 25, 30, 35, 40. They were packed into there, no furniture. Everybody sat on the floor on goat skins. The only furniture was a log that served as an altar. And then one Sunday night, a third of Chief Msuduga's wives came forward to pray. That night, Chief Msuduga and part of a regiment of his warriors stormed into the outstation. He was livid. He was beyond angry. You couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Screaming at the top of his lungs. When he finally wore himself down to where they could understand him, he was screaming, get out of my country. It's finished. This business of God. Get out of my world. Samuel, I'll be merciful with you because you're blood kin of mine, because both of us are directly related to the king of Swaziland. I will give you 1 week to clear out of my country. Get out. If you ring this bell next Sunday morning, I'll be up here on the hillside with my warriors. We'll come down here into this churchyard. We'll pack you and your wife and your baby into this church, and we'll set fire to this place. We'll see if your God can walk on fire. Get out of my country. Words swept like wildfire across the grapevine. Chief Msuduga had read the ultimatum to Samuel. Monday, Tuesday, from village to village, preaching and praying with the people. Everywhere he went, there was a whisper. What are you going to do, Samuel? What are you going to do? Nobody wanted to get too close. Preaching from village to village, Wednesday, Thursday. She tied the baby onto her back with a goat skin, following her husband down the footpaths as she did every day of her life. Preaching with the people, back to the village. Friday. He knew it would be useless to walk 45 miles over the mountains to the mission station. The missionary wouldn't be there. He'd be way down in the fever country somewhere, trying to open up another church. And he would walk 45 miles back, not having received the advice that he was seeking. And so as the weeks slipped by, he stayed with the work that God had given him to do and spent every night on his knees. Saturday, nobody would speak to them now. From village to village, preaching and praying with the people. Dusk fell. They had covered about 20, maybe 22 miles on foot that day. Weary and tired, they walked into the churchyard. A huge moon had come out behind the mountains behind them. Stark black and white shadows from the thorn tree on the ground. His wife turned to him. Tomorrow's the Sabbath day. What are you going to do, Samuel? Do you want me to fix something to take along the way for the baby? Yes, yes. Go get something for the baby. Take the baby and flee for your life. You can cross the Kamadi River before dawn. You'll be in the mountains up towards the mission station by late afternoon tomorrow. If you really push yourself, I'll stay and ring the bell. Head out. She reached up and stopped him. Samuel, God put us in this church together. God intended for us to stay in it together. And I'm not leaving until He tells both of us to leave. He watched her as she turned in silence, walked over to her little grass beehive-shaped parsonage, dropped onto her hands and knees, crawled through the low doorway to feed her baby and put it to bed. He turned, walked over to the back of his little mud church, pushed his way inside. No door to open, just a frame. No benches to stumble over. No lights to turn on. No furniture. Just moonlight streaming through a square in a mud wall on this side of the church, splashed across a log that served as an altar. He found his way down to the front of his church, lifted his face before God in prayer. Tomorrow's the Sabbath, Lord. What do you want me to do? Do I stay here and ring that bell in the morning and die? And if I do, Lord, who's going to take care of this flock? If I take my wife and baby and I flee through the night for the mission station, who's going to take care of this flock? Tell me what to do, Lord. What do you want me to do? Outside, a great tropical moon started to climb, hour after hour, as Samuel stood before the throne of God. High up over the little thatched roof, that moonlight rose, until at last it started to slide down the far side, and the moonlight splashed through the square on the other side of his church. Dawn was not far away. What do you want me to do, Lord? Must I ring that bell? He heard a sound beside him. He stopped mid-sentence, turned, and his eyes flickered open. He looked down that log altar. He didn't know when she had slipped in during the night to back him up with her prayer, but there knelt his little wife. And when she heard him stop praying, she too stopped, and her eyes came open, and in a soft, low voice, she said, Samuel, why do you stop praying? Has God spoken to you? For a long moment, Samuel was silent. And then she saw him as he slowly started to nod his head. Just a dark shadow amid darker shadows. And in a deep, soft voice, he said, God has just spoken to me. These are the words that He's given me. For He has said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I shall not fear what man shall do unto me. I think Jesus must have walked into that church about that time, because they had an old-fashioned camp meeting, just the three of them, up and down the aisle, shouting and praising God. Samuel had his commission. Ring it, Samuel. Ring that bell. I'll walk every step of the way with you. Ring it right to the gates of eternity. I'll be beside you. In the early gray light of dawn, he hunted around till he found the big 18-inch iron bolt with which he used to pound the plowshare that hung in the tree out in front of the church. that was the bell for the church. He dusted the sand off that bolt. He wasn't going to ring it yet, but he certainly wasn't going to be late when it came time to ring it. Up and down he paced in front of the church, back and forth. The first golden rays of sunlight started to climb over the mountain. Already on the huge granite domes that rose above the elephant grass, hundreds and hundreds of people started to gather. They stood in silence, watching the church down there. Back and forth he paced. The sun he didn't have a watch, but he knew that when the sun would reach a certain place in the branches of that thorn tree, it'd be time for the morning service. He watched it like a hawk. Higher and higher it started to climb. Up and down he paced, spit on his hand, clasped that bolt. Way up there in a great fork of the tree, the sun clicked into place. He sailed through the air, landed under that bell. Both feet came off of the ground. He brought that bolt down with all of his strength. A sigh from 1,000 throats, like the wind, escaped from the people as they stood watching from the vantage points on the rocks around the church. Chief of Suduga was stunned. He turned to the warriors behind him and he shouted an order. They leapt to their feet, the red light of the rising sun flashing from their spears. Down the mountainside they swept, their Zulu war cries rolling down the valley ahead of them. Samuel never heard them, never saw them come. He had one thought: ring that bell. He was pounding that bell with every inch of strength that he had, back and forth. His feet never hit the ground. The dust rose in great clouds around him. Up and down he went, followed that bell. Samuel, ring that bell, the Lord had told him. At the mission station, 45 miles away, Saturday afternoon, Missionary had been gone for a month or more. He came walking slowly into the mission, hanging onto the horn of the saddle. Malaria, barely conscious. They came running out of the mission home. They helped him down off of the horse. They brought him over to the house and sat him down inside next to the fire. Missionary's wife filled him full of quinine, then fixed some supper for him. Within an hour or two, the quinine had started to work and his head started to clear. But that night, they retired early after supper. But as was his custom, before he retired for the night, he fell to his knees beside his pallet. The next day would be the Sabbath. All across Africa, those little African preachers would be standing in the pulpit preaching against the awful darkness of Africa's witchcraft and demon worship. One by one, he took each of those preachers and their wives, put them up there before God in prayer, got their blessing, put them back into their church, took the next couple, put them up there before God in prayer, got their blessing, put them back into their church. Took little old Samuel and his wife, put them up there before God in prayer, and almost instantly, Samuel came back. He took him again, and he put him up there before God in prayer, and Samuel came straight back. I must be tired. It must be the fever. I'll feel better in the morning. Missionary rolled into bed to try to sleep. Outside, a great tropical moon started to climb. High over the thatched roof of that little church, that moon rose. Hour after hour, Missionary lay tossing back and forth. Samuel kept coming back. Something's the matter with Samuel. About midnight, he slipped quietly out of bed. He scooped up his riding garb, tiptoed into the kitchen area where the dying embers of the fire still cast a little light, pulled on his clothes, reached down to pull on his big old Western boots. The curtain rustled, and there stood his wife. What's the matter? Something's wrong with Samuel. I've got to go see what's the matter. Are you strong enough? Can you hold on? The only horse that's left is the stallion. Do you think you can hang on to him? I'll try. Go get him, and I'll fix something for you to take along the way. Almost 1 o'clock in the morning, Missionary's wife and 2 little sons stood outside the kitchen door, watched him as he piled up onto the back of that huge gray Arabian stallion, saw it as it reared and bucked, then leapt forward, tried to wrestle the bit away from him. Missionary brought it around, and then at a dead gallop they crossed the mission yard. No time to take the long way to ford the Kamadi River where it was shallow, where there was no danger of the crocodiles. Barely time to get there if he took the shortcut. Down into the dark pools of the Kamadi River they plunged, and God alone held back the death that lurks in those waters as they swam the 200-yard wide river, clambered up the reed beds on the far side, out across mile after mile of lion country. Dogs ran barking into darkened villages. The old men got up, stood out in the moonlight, threw sticks on the fire and built it up, listened to the sound of a horse running like it had never run before. That horse seemed to catch the urgency of his mission. It got the bit between its teeth. It ran like it had never run before, the froth streaming back across its flanks. Mile after mile slipped by. Ahead of him, he saw the first golden rays of light on the mountain. Then he was in the foothills, and the sun was climbing over his shoulder. And up there in a great fork of the tree, at last that tropical sun clicked into place. The missionary heard the first clear note of the bell 500 yards away, down by the spring. He came pounding through the cornfield into the yard of the church. He reined the horse to a stop. He'd seen preachers ring bells before, but he'd never seen a man ringing a bell like this man was ringing it. Samuel! Samuel! Samuel never heard him. He had one thought: ring that bell. He was but Samuel's little wife heard him. She whirled around, the baby clasped to her. She pointed past the corner of the church, up the valley. Missionary whirled his horse around. Something would have to be done now. He pounded up the mountainside to meet them. Chief Msuduga flew past him. Get out of here, white man. You'll get killed today. Missionary rose in the stirrups and lifted his hands. And for just an instant, everybody came to a crashing stop. They'd heard that God had done some pretty wonderful things for this missionary. They didn't know but what something would happen now. Maybe lightning or something like that. That was all the time he needed. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth on him should not perish, but have everlasting life. In Siswati it goes like this. Unkulunkulu watanda izvikangaga wanigilindota na yake ezelwe yotwa akuba bonke bakolwa yiyo bangapupi babenugupila ogupagate. He started to preach. He started to tell them the wonderful age-old story of Jesus. They stood in amazement. The spears started to come down. Hour after hour, the horse moved back and forth. He told them the entire story of Jesus. They stood and listened. It was mid-afternoon. He brought his message to a close. That's the joy, the love, the freedom, the peace that we've come to tell you about. That's what you're trying to burn down there. Instantly, a councilman was on his feet. Missionary, I've never heard this before. If it is as you say it is, I refuse to have any part of the burning of that church. I'll stand alone. He marched over and stood by himself. The missionary saw his opportunity instantly. Those of you that have the courage to say what this man has just said, stand behind him over here. Slowly, like an old man coming to his feet, the crowd started to move. They watched a miracle unfold. Every single person, joined by the hundreds that had come in from the rocks, moved across and stood in front of the councilman. Fear filled the eyes of Chief Msuduga. Missionary, no man has ever made my tribe disobey me before. It can't be you. It must be your God. If it's your God, I too am afraid to touch that church. I'll stand with my tribe. He marched over and stood once more in front of his people. Missionary wheeled his horse around. Let's tell Samuel about your decision, he said. They pounded down the mountainside into the churchyard. It was almost dusk. You know what Samuel was doing? You should. Still wailing away on that plowshare. All day, God told him to ring that bell. Samuel, they want to hear you preach. He preached as if his heart would break. At the close of that sermon, the 1st Regiment of Swazi warriors came marching forward, laid their big shields down, bowed their shaggy heads and their white ostrich plumes, put down their spears humbly at the feet of Jesus. Chief Msuduga had something to say. My people, I told this preacher that that bell would never ring again. God corrected me today. Samuel, in my country, from this day until the end of eternity, that bell will never be threatened again. Do you understand me? And old Samuel just took that big iron bolt and just came down, dust flying from his feet, back and forth, followed that bell, beat it. But the truth of the matter is that in the next 6 years or so, on 4 occasions, Chief Msuduga and his warriors stormed into the yard of the church and tore it to the ground. Each time so that they could build it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to house the multitudes, one under the anointed ministry of that African preacher. And the church now started to grow across the mountains, and the foundations of a district were laid. Until one morning, out of the night came a runner. Tired, he dropped to his knees at Samuel's hut and whispered something in his ear, staggered up the hillside to the chief's village, whispered something in his ear, fell to the ground unconscious. The chief shouted for a councilman, take charge of the tribe, I'll be gone 10 days. Chief, how can we reach you? Where are you going? This man tells me that my missionary's God is calling him home. He'll answer his God immediately. I must speak to him before he answers his God. You can reach me at the mission station. He took the trail. By noon, he had caught up to Samuel and his wife. By dusk, they had crossed the Kamati River. It was dawn the next day, 24 hours later, and 45 miles of mountain walking. They came staggering into the mission. The people had heard. A huge crowd had gathered. Chief Msuduga was royalty. It was disrespect for him not to first greet the people. Silently, he pushed his way through the crowd, impatiently up to the door of the mission home, knocked on it. Missionary's wife opened it. Chief Msuduga, can I help you, Chief? They tell me that my missionary's God is calling him home. I want to speak to him before he answers his God. He won't know you, Chief. He's been in a coma for the last couple hours. He doesn't know anybody right now. He's delirious. Let me see him, the chief pled. They pulled back the burlap curtains and they led him in to where the missionary's fever-racked body lay tossing restlessly back and forth on his pallet. And Chief Msuduga walked up to the side of the cot and went down and grabbed his hot, fevery hand between his two enormous hands. And the tears welled up in his eyes, and the missionary flung himself restlessly back across the cot, paused for a minute, and the coma broke. And his eyes came open, and a puzzled look crossed his face. Chief Msuduga, he whispered, is it really you that is here beside me, Chief? Missionary, listen to me carefully. Missionary, explain to your God that you have just arrived in Africa, that we've just barely learned his name. Missionary, ask him, tell him that we, the people of Africa, ask that you be allowed to stay a while longer. He'll let you stay, missionary. No, Chief. Long ago, I asked him to give me 6 more churches. Just 6 more. He's given me 29 churches since that day. I have no more words with which I can speak to my God. I understand, missionary. I too am a man of honor. As you leave Africa forever tonight, go in peace. Go knowing this one thing: Samuel's arms will never grow tired. We'll hold them up. That bell, missionary, it will ring on every mountainside in Africa until Jesus comes back someday. Chief Msuduga turned, walked outside, sat by himself under a thorn tree at the edge of the yard. As a candle flares up in the moment that it dies out, in the last hours of the afternoon of the 29th of May, the missionary rallied his strength. In fact, they carried him out on his cot into the yard, and everybody clustered as close as they could in absolute silence around him. And for about 20 minutes, he brought them a message of farewell. And then God's chariot came, took him home to his reward. And they carried his body just 50 feet away. And there, beside the graves of 4 of his children, they laid him to rest, to await the eternal dawn. National workers and missionaries alike turned and scattered across Africa, determined that bell, it would ring in every corner of Africa till Jesus comes back someday. The British government conscripted 100,000 Swazi warriors to help fight back the German invasion of North Africa. Rommel was on the march. And when that 100,000 men were asked who they wanted as their chaplain, like one man, their vote came back. Give us Samuel to lead us. He took his big Bible and gave it to his little wife. Feed my Lord's people until I come back. I'm a soldier now. Squared his shoulders, put his testament into his pocket, turned on his heel, marched out of the green mountainsides of Swaziland, nearly 7,000 miles across Africa, into the burning sands of the Sahara, and up there at Tripoli, 3 years later, front lines, leading his people. Out of the sky, there came the scream of a bomb. a blinding flash, and a great chunk of white-hot steel sliced its way across Samuel's face, instantly blinded completely. The years that he had run away from caught up to him overnight, rolled across his head, turned his hair white, broken in health, blind, back to Swaziland. His big Bible was waiting for him. God's chariot had taken his little wife on to her reward. Missionaries tried to reason with him. You could retire now, Samuel. We'll take care of you. You don't understand, missionary. Before you were ever born, in that wonderful land of God that they call America, out here in the darkness of Africa's night, I promised him I would preach forever. Forever has not come yet. But if I'm no use anymore, I found a people hiding in the caves, on the mountains, their fingers gone, their noses eaten away. Let me go to those people and tell them of a God who can heal them of a leprosy of the soul. They set him free to walk the mountainsides, a little boy leading him with a stick, preaching in the caves to the lepers. I think you know the rest of the story. It's modern history. The work among the lepers of Swaziland soon organized under Samuel into an enormous, huge leper colony, so big that when the church was unable, after 4 missionaries had been assigned to help him, unable to keep pace, the United Nations stepped in, and they made it a model for the world. And then somebody discovered a cure for Hansen's disease. Too old to be of any use anymore. I said goodbye to Samuel. It was back at the mission station where he had first found God. Huge camp meeting. Big tabernacle. Every bit as big as this one, if not bigger. And we were waiting for the people to come in that night. I got to talking to a group of the preachers just outside the tabernacle. Dad walked up to me. He had come to say goodbye at the place where he had been born. He bumped me and he said, Harmon, did you notice Samuel over there? Did you see who he's talking to? I turned to look. Samuel had been ordained in 1936. Tremendous preacher, totally blind now. Next to him stood the superintendent of southern Swaziland, Simeon Dlamini. Simeon was one of our greatest Simeon was the boy that had dashed up over the mountainside to go get the witch doctor to come and doctor their village. Next to him stood Titus Dlamini. Titus, a tremendous holiness preacher, the pastor of the Manzini Church, enormous church in Swaziland. He was the boy that had pounded those rocks into the ground and tied his elder brother down. And next to them stood Philemon Dlamini. He was the boy that had killed that goat and built the fire to doctor the village. And next to them stood Jacob Dlamini, big bushy beard, evangelist, holiness, preacher, par excellent. Once more, a united family through the blood of Jesus Christ. These great men were carrying the light in the darkness of Africa. They were talking about the meetings that were coming up and the pastors that were changing churches, and I watched. Samuel was no longer an active part of this work. I could see that he was a little bit left out. In fact, unnoticed by his brothers, I saw him reach out and touch the wall of the tabernacle behind him. They didn't notice him when he turned and he started to follow the wall. But Dad and I never said a word as our eyes followed him. He got to the end of the tabernacle, and without any hesitation, he launched himself out over open ground for about 50 feet, up to the little white picket fence. He pushed open the gate, past those 4 little graves that lie there, up to the grave of that first missionary. He lifted his face, and we could see the dying rays of the sun lit it up. He was fighting a mighty battle. Dad and I took off like a shot. He was praying, Lord, the work is secure. Let me go now. Let me rest. I can't do anything much anymore. Let me get up there to heaven and find my missionary. Sit down across a campfire. Tell him what's happened and how the church has grown. Dad threw an arm up over Samuel's shoulder. Startled, he turned, reached out and felt Dad's face, recognized him, called him by his African name. Vusikama. Did you hear what I prayed? Samuel, when you're gone, where must we bring these young new missionaries coming into Africa to hear the story about ringing the bell regardless, right up to the gates of eternity? For a minute, Samuel was totally silent. And then I saw a faint smile on the corners of his mouth. He shook his head. He turned to my dad and he said, you were just a child. You were about 10, 11 years old, way back there when I rang that bell. You've never forgotten, Samuel, missionary. No, Samuel. None of us will ever forget. Thank you for reminding me. That day I promised him I would ring it forever. Forever hasn't come yet. Watched him square his shoulders. He pushed his way past us into the closing hours of that great service. And that last night of the camp, Dad preached exactly the same message that you have heard tonight. Samuel sat on the front row down here. The crowd came to their feet. Samuel, we'll hold up your arms. Keep ringing the bell forever. The big 20,000 candle power kerosene lights started to go out for lack of pressure. The crowd marched past, shook his hand. I heard bare feet on cold concrete. He took my hand and called me by my African name. He said, Sipahan, they tell us that in a few days you journey to the great land of America. As you travel that land from one side to the other, do me a favor, would you? I want you to thank those wonderful people for the sacrifice that they have made, that we, living in darkness, might hear the story of Jesus. You tell them that we appreciate it. You tell them that their sons and their daughters that lie buried in foreign soil are deeply appreciated by us. And one day, when we all get to heaven, I'm going to ask for the personal privilege of thanking them myself. He turned and he started for the door. He got about 10 steps down and he stopped, called back to me. Oh, another thing you must tell them. Tell them to keep holding the ropes, because on the other side out here in the darkness in Africa, we're still ringing the bell. He got right to the door. He turned and he said, we'll see you when you get back. It was not to be. My phone rang in Nairobi, Kenya. I flew 4,000 miles to be there. The coffin lay at the front of the tabernacle. The military was there, an entire regiment. The tabernacle was packed. At the close of the message, the government had asked for permission to have the military carry the coffin from the church, the tabernacle, down to the grave. I turned it over to a 4-star general. He was dressed immaculately in a white uniform. He stood straight and he shouted one order. Hundreds of feet came down on the concrete. 6 men stepped forward in white uniforms, their guns upside down and pointing to the earth. They unrolled that beautiful Swazi flag, red, yellow, and gold, with a big black and white African shield in the middle of it. Another order was shouted, and they lifted that coffin effortlessly. And then to the roll of drums, in a slow half march, they went the length of the tabernacle, and all of us came to our feet and followed them. Outside it was almost dusk. The mist was coming down across the mountains. Orders were shouted. 21 guns went to the shoulders of warriors, and they boomed shot after shot after shot. It was salute to a king. They carried the coffin down past the tabernacle into the little white picket fence, and we laid him to rest just 10 feet from my grandfather's grave to await the eternal dawn. It's not going to be long for all of us till we're there. On that last day, when you make it, when you get inside those great white gates, get over to the right-hand side and stop and look back through the gates and watch as the crowd from Africa comes up out of eternity. Out ahead of that great crowd, you're going to see a proud, tall, young Swazi warrior running. You'll recognize him immediately because in his hand he has a great big bent iron bolt, and he'll shoot right past us, right up to the throne, to lay it down at the feet of Jesus in exchange for a crown of pure gold. And when he turns to walk down the ranks of the faithful and thank you, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to fall into line to translate for you and interpret for him. Those, my friends, are the men and women that you have won around the world. That's what we're involved in. He had walked the length of the 20th century and never faltered in his walk with Jesus. God bless you, and thank you.
We're glad you joined us. God's Bible School and College prepares students for lives of ministry wherever God calls them. This content is possible because of the generous support of friends like you. To support GBSC, visit giving.gbs.edu. Thank you.